Welcome to Hot Mike with Houston and Hogan. I'm the Houston part.
And a big Hogan howdy from Hogan Holler.
Hey there, Dave Hogan. How you doing?
Doing great. We got a special guest today that popped into our podcast studio.
Our worldwide headquarters of Hot Mike and Houston Hogan here.
We were just talking about the fact that with the internet, you can listen anywhere in the world to what we do.
And we do, and we're fortunate to have some worldwide listeners
In
here.
some of my foreign travels back in the late 60s, early 70s, I became well acquainted with, his name is Jan Šestak in what was then Czechoslovakia. It's now the Czech Republic. So he listens to the podcast over there and tells all his friends.
Love it.
In the Czech Republic.
Jan?
And they tune in.
Is it Jan?
Jan, yes.
Shout out to Jan. We really appreciate that, Jan.
Introduce our special guest, Randy.
Richard Hurley. How in the world are you, old friend?
Well, I'm doing great, and it's just I'm flattered to be here with two radio legends because I've known you boys for a long, long time, and you are both legends.
Well, when you put legend next to somebody's name.
Well, it makes them more than 35 years old, doesn't it?
That's
there
right.
You go. I heard a story the other day. If you hang around long enough, you win some awards. That's us.
Did you know that at one time I was the youngest person on earth?
Oh, really?
That's right.
That was a year or two ago, huh?
Richard is how do you categorize yourself if you just isolate Richard Hurley to what you've done in music? Somebody says, what kind of music do you do?
Well,
what's your answer?
I guess my answer to that is I try to be more of an entertainer. I'm no Tony Rice on the guitar.
But you're a great lyricist. You've written some wonderful, I would call them, for lack of any better term, I think it's a good term, folk music. It's music about people and about life and about things.
You're very kind. I made the statement, someone asked me something about that, and I said the greatest legacy I think a body could leave, that I could leave anyway, would be 100 years from now that people hear my songs and call them folk music.
That's
great.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of the way I look at it, to answer your question.
We were talking
I'm an entertainer.
About the Shindig on the Green. I know you've done some MC work up there for Shindig on the Green.
Long time.
I had the pleasure of being, now at the time it didn't probably seem like much of a pleasure for me. I probably wanted to be doing something else, but I worked for Zeb Lee at WSKY, and he says they're starting this thing we called it City County Plaza at the time. I forget what we called it, the mobile music machine or something like that. Take it up there and do some broadcasting. So I went up there for the very first Shindig on the Green.
Wow.
Jesse James Bailey was the master of ceremonies at the very first one.
Former sheriff of Buncombe County.
And Madison County.
Right.
He's the only person that's been sheriff of 2 counties in North Carolina.
Quite a character, I understand.
Oh, my goodness. He's a great storyteller. And at this very first Shindig, he said Jackie Kennedy was in the news a lot at the time. I think she was, at that time, the widow of the president, John Kennedy. And she was in the news when she was dating the Greek fellow, Onassis.
Right.
And so Jesse James Bailey said, howdy, folks. Welcome to our Shindig on the Green. Got a lot of celebrities here. The mayor's over here. Is Jackie Kennedy in the audience? Jackie Kennedy. Hey, Jackie. And everybody started looking around, for Jackie Kennedy. And he then said, well, I guess we'll have to go on without her.
That's good.
He sure got the crowd's attention, didn't
Yeah, you wrote a song, didn't you,
I did.
Richard, about Shindig on the Green?
Yeah, one day I just thought about the fact that, maybe you kind of need a little theme song for the Shindig. So I sat down one day and wrote this song and recorded it and on my first album, My Mountains, My Songs. And the great Josh Goforth, the genius musician, did all the parts, and I needed a banjo. He's a good banjo player, but we decided to pull in Mark Pruitt. Mark Pruitt, of course, Grammy Award-winning banjo player with Balsam Range, and we pulled Mark in to do the
and Mark used to
on
be with Ricky Skaggs.
he won a Grammy with Ricky Skaggs, and so he played the 5 on that one. But anyway, what I tried to do is to bring in every aspect of the shindig on the green, and we talked a little bit about some of the legends that have come through the shindig, like cut their teeth there, like the great Brian Sutton, Mark, of course, and others. But anyway, that was the genesis of that particular song.
You mind if we play the folks a little bit of that song?
I'd be flattered.
All right, let's see if we can get Shindig on the green.
Shindig, shindig, shindig on the green. Music, dancing, the best you've ever seen. Saturday night in Asheville, that's the music scene. Come on down and have some fun with Shindig on the green. Arvil bows the fiddle, Georgie picks the 5. Leonard plays the rhythm, Boyd keeps the beat alive. They play for all the dance teams, been picking here for years. Stony Creek's the bluegrass band, the people love to hear.
And that is good music, Richard.
Well, thank you very
That
much.
is great
Appreciate
music.
that.
And Bascom Lamar Lunsford is a name that anybody, whether they're living in Asheville, Buncombe County, or Bakersfield, California, somebody will know the name Bascom Lamar Lunsford, responsible for cataloging and writing a lot of folk music, and also was the originator and master of ceremonies. I can see him now in that white suit that he wore, of the Mountain Dance and Folk Festival. And you wrote a song about that, didn't you?
Yeah, the Mountain Dance and Folk Festival.
Or you wrote a song about Bascom.
Yeah, but the Mountain Dance and Folk Festival is America's longest running continuous folk festival. We even kept it going during COVID.
1928?
Your memory's good. That's exactly
Did
when it
you
started.
ever see that clip from 1928 that's colorized of Bascom Lamar Lunsford doing a fiddle tune he wrote called Dogged Mountain?
Don't recall it, but I did go to some of them when he was still alive.
Yeah, but there's a clip on there, and it says on there that it is the oldest folk music video in existence.
Huh.
And so maybe before the end of our little get-together here, we'll find that.
Yeah, there we go. It's called a tribute to Bascom Lamar Lunsford. Yeah.
It's about the folk festival primarily, tribute to Bascom.
Okay.
In 1882, Bascom was born where the mountain air blows cool. A gentleman farmer and a lawyer man, this minstrel of the mountains loved God's green land. A man with a vision and a love for the past, he made sure the dances and the ballads would last. Preserving our culture and our music so pure, the hollers and the coves were his constant lure. He gathered up folks, some young and some old. There were dancers and singers and pickers, I'm told. In the year 28, here in Asheville town.
That's a great, I'm telling you that he was an early song catcher.
Yeah.
Really, he was.
Yeah.
But here, Randy, is, before the end of the program, maybe pull up a little of this, the first ever video of Appalachian music under just Google Bascom Lamar Lunsford, and it is colorized. You know how you remember a few years ago when they started colorizing movies, old black and white movies, and somebody colorized, and you've got Bascom here who's probably in his 30s. See him sitting on the porch there.
Yeah, that's neat.
But anyway, we can't show it on the podcast anyway, but it's the first ever video of Appalachian music.
Well, I sure remember seeing him and meeting him back in the early 60s when they used to have it at the old city auditorium. And we would leave there, and we would, after it was over, some of us pickers go over to the West Gate and play until about 5 in the morning till they run us off to do drive-in church. But that all spawned my music.
Shall we go from the drive-in church to the beer city?
Hey, Dave, your disc jockey buddy over here found Beer City, Asheville Beer City. Let's give that a listen.
Growing up in the hills, you could get a quick thrill sip of moonshine. Hugging with your cutie in the drive-in movie made you both feel mighty, mighty fine. But times have changed and the beer has too. The craft beers have taken the scene. The brewers now number a dozen or so, and Asheville's a beer lover's dream. Sip a cold beer and spread a lot of cheer whenever you come to Beer City. In Asheville town, you could drink another round, maybe get a little bit giddy.
I love it. I love it.
That's good. Tell us about the song, how it came about.
Well, I recorded this album back about, I think it was 2013. In that time, Asheville had the reputation for being Beer City like 4 or 5 years in a row, something like that on a national basis. So I was just sitting around one day and thought, I believe we need us a song. So we sat down, wrote this song, and tried to tie in everything I could about Beer City.
I'm glad you did, man. I really am.
You are well acquainted with the fellow who maybe started one of the first craft breweries.
Oscar Wong is a very good friend of mine. Matter of fact, the Boy Scouts honored him not long ago with our Distinguished Citizen Award, because Oscar Wong is the man who actually started the back in 94. He started brewing beer just as a hobby, and he's called the godfather of craft brewing here in Western North Carolina. And now there are hundreds of breweries out there. Whatever, it's a big number, but Oscar's the one that started.
Even your old hometown, Canton, has
my
a
old hometown
brewery.
of Canton's got one.
And that cult-like following of Coal Mountain beer will be released here
that's
soon.
right.
It usually comes around in November every year, and it truly is a cult following.
Yes, you're exactly right, Randy. But Oscar Wong is just one of the finest people you'll ever meet. Wonderful guy.
Yeah. Well, there was a song about Cold Mountain that you wrote. It wasn't about the beer. Tell us about what it is.
Well, on September the 13th, Friday the 13th of 1946, a B-25 bomber, right after the war, had never been painted. This bomber's initial class B-25 was flying from Detroit down to Tampa. Youngest general in the Air Corps, and 2 sergeants and 2 colonels. And they called into the tower in Bristol and said they wanted to go visual, and said, well, be careful, it's kind of nasty weather. Well, he missed the top of Coal Mountain by about 150 feet, and that plane crashed into Coal Mountain. Now, those folks lived up in Crusoe and around there outside of Canton. That was quite an event. So there's a book written about it, and I got interested in it and learned a lot about it, and I just decided I needed to write a song about the Coal Mountain bomber crash, and that's basically, a lot of my songs are story songs, as you're noticing. So this is a story about the Coal Mountain bomber crash. Are the folks who still are alive, who remember the crash of that B-25 on the 13th of September on a foggy Friday morn. Many years ago, Coal Mountain's face was torn. The war was not long over, and the boys had all come home. The year was 46.
Well, that mountain spawned a lot of books, and movies, and songs about plane crashes.
Well, that particular song, the if you listen, when you get to hear the whole thing, Josh Goforth again did the production on that, and we brought in Tony Creasman, who's Willie Nelson's studio drummer, and he'd worked with Glenn Campbell and Merle Haggard and a few of those folks, James Taylor. But you can just hear the way he did the percussion. You can hear that bomber coming in there. Eddie Swan, the great Eddie Swan, the legendary Eddie Swan,
absolutely legendary,
is the engineer that produced both my albums as far as the electronic side of it. But he's worked with a lot of he's recorded Tony Rice and George Beverly Shea and Vince Gill and a lot of big names, and Regal Music is the name of his business, and we still get together and jam some, and we're going to do another album one of these days. But Eddie Swan is a legend too.
He's a fine guitar player too.
He is a great guitar player.
And Richard, before we forget it, we need to tell the people listening to the podcast your website if they want to get some of your music.
Yeah, Dave, thank you. It's Richard Hurley, Hurley, richardhurleymusic.com. And when you go to the website, there are a number of tabs there, and one of them's got a tab that's a video tab that has a couple of my songs with videos that we did to kind of meld in the songs with my song, or the lyrics and the music together, the songs. So
I was raised over in Cherokee County in far western North Carolina, not the town of Cherokee, but Cherokee County over there, Andrews, Murphy, over in that area.
Know where that is.
Where I was raised. Pool rooms had a bad reputation when I was growing up. And I distinctly remember my mom saying, David, we better not catch you in a pool room or on one of them motorcycles. Now, there's a song for you, pool
There
rooms
you
and
go.
motorcycles.
And throw a beer in there, and you got a real song, right?
Yeah, oh, my goodness. But tell us about the pool room challenge.
Well, this goes back to when I was in college at Chapel Hill. I'd come home from break, and they had the old Canton Y. Of course, the mill, is closed there in Canton. Now, we had an old Y that was there that was replaced by a machine over there years ago. Anyway, we all learned to play pool, swim at the Y, and whatnot. Well, the new Y, I'd come home from school break, and this kid, I was a decent pool player. I wasn't one of the best, but I beat most of the local boys there. Well, this old younger kid saw me, and he says, "Hey, Richard, let's shoot some pool." And I said, "Well, I'd love to, but I got a date." And he said, "Well, come on, let's play." And I said, "Well, I really don't have time." He said, "What's the matter, you chicken or something?" Ooh. And I said, "Ooh, yeah." I said, "I can't let that go by." So I said, well, I looked at my watch, and I said, "Tell you what," I said, "we'll play one game. What do you want to play?" And he said, 8-ball. So all these other kids quit playing around. There are 4 tables there, and all these other kids quit playing. They all pulled their chairs in there to see this event. And this, you've heard of your 15 minutes of fame. This was my 15 minutes of fame, because every once in a while I might run a rack, but not very often. Well, I went over and I pulled the stick off the wall and chalked it up. And I said, you want me to rack him or break him?" He says, "You can break him, just don't miss." Well, I broke those suckers and ran the table.
Oh my gosh.
And he stood there. Well, anyway, the song tells it all, but that's what inspired that song.
Well, let's listen in to the pool room challenge.
Josh has
piece
worked
of it.
great here on this one.
Oh, yeah.
He called me out one Saturday night like a playground bully in a schoolyard fight. I remember back before you went off to school, you used to shoot some pretty good pool. Well, I've got real good to this custom cue, and 5 says I can lay a whooping on you. 8-ball, that's my game of pool. By the way, pal, the name's Kelly Cool.
Fantastic. That is great.
I wish you could, Kelly, but I got a hot date, and she'll be right ill if I get there late. I believe you might be scared of a licking,
Because it seems to me like you're just plain old chicken. Now, I did embellish it a little bit, because back in those days, I didn't have any money to gamble, and we didn't have breakdown cues, and this kid's name was not Kelly Cool, but, I had to embellish it. But it's basically a true story and autobiographical song.
That's got the feel of the Johnny Cash song, "The Baron."
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
I remember that now. But Josh did that music, and when you listen to the whole thing, you can hear the balls dropping the way he did the music.
Wow.
That you can hear the balls dropping, like he talks about cutting the 5, the 3 bank, 3 rail the 2, and whatever I've said.
Since I was prohibited from going into a pool room, I have no idea what you're talking about. None whatsoever.
I don't believe that.
No, that's true. Never had what do you call them?
A cue stick.
A cue stick. Never had one in my hand in my life.
Wow. Well.
I told you
that
I was
was a fun
raised
song.
in Cherokee County by a fundamentalist Baptist preacher.
Yeah.
You didn't go in pool rooms. Stay off them motorcycles, too.
And don't drink any beer.
Speaking of beer, you got another beer song here called "My Budweiser Billfold."
Oh, boy.
I love that song. I love the lyrics. You talk about a well-written,
Well, thank you, Dave. You're very kind.
great lyric.
Yeah, I was in the Navy during the NOM era, and I was sitting in a bar one evening it was, after work. And there was a career guy sitting there next to me, and he was about 3 sheets to the wind, and I was maybe a quarter of a sheet. I'd had a couple, and he looked over at me, and he says, "You know what, son?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I tell you what," says, "my girlfriend's got a Scotch and water taste, and I got a Budweiser billfold." I said, "Boy, I went back to the ship, and I wrote this song."
I'll be darned.
Took my little girl out to have a little drink. I said, "What will you have?" And she said, "I think a little Scotch and water, that'll do me just fine. We can have a few together. Big man, you'll be mine." Well, I wanted that woman and I wanted her bad. I spent all the money that I ever had just to
Richard, you have written so many songs. How many songs are in your catalog?
Well, there's 15 on this album, and then there's 15 on my Catalucci album, the other album. Then I've got a few more that I haven't recorded yet. That
Wow.
I probably need to do something with.
When I first heard that Budweiser song, my Budweiser billfold, you being in that bar room, it reminded me of Tom T. Hall's Watermelon and Children.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Old dogs,
Yeah.
children, and watermelon wine, because he was sitting in a bar in Miami
Yeah.
and
Well,
got
your
the
memory's
inspiration
good.
for
Yeah.
that song.
Yeah.
Well, of course, to any Haywood County boy, the Pigeon River is home sweet home. And I'm so glad the Pigeon River is flowing clean now.
Yeah.
Back when I was growing up in Madison County, you talk about growing up out in the country, the Pigeon River didn't smell too good. And actually, all of our rivers around here didn't smell too good. The French Broad River that went through Marshall was polluted. And we've made a lot of progress.
We
you know?
have.
We
You know,
certainly
people
have.
talk about going back to the good old days, and I sometimes think about the good old days when the rivers were polluted and the air was polluted, and how much progress we've made in cleaning up the peaceful Pigeon River. Tell us about that.
You're exactly right, Randy. And this song, gosh, I wrote this one way, way, way back. And as we were getting ready to record this in Eddie's studio with Josh doing the music, the night before I went over there, I had written this song 40 or 45 years ago, something like that, give or take. And I couldn't come up with a tune. And I was struggling. I needed one more song. And I came up with a tune the night before we went in there. But it talks about growing up in Canton and around the Pigeon River and the beauty of Haywood County where I grew up. And that's basically what the song's about. And but now some people say, well, they've had floods over there since then, which they have, but this is still about the peaceful Pigeon River.
in the mountains of western North Carolina, near the border of old Tennessee, by the banks of the peaceful Pigeon River, that's where I'll always want to be. I grew up in the hills of Haywood County, where the sky gently swallows.
That sounds a little like Bobby Hicks on the fiddle, huh?
Well, that's just Josh.
Josh, okay.
Goforth.
All right.
And he's a genius musician. He plays
really is.
everything. He's just great. Anytime you can go see Josh Goforth, go see him.
He
What?
played with Doc Watson a lot.
He's
didn't
got some good stories about having picked with Doc.
Yeah.
But he's right up there with the big ones. Josh Goforth is.
Richard knows this, but Randy may not. Something that's unique about Haywood County and rivers and streams, no water runs into Haywood County. All the water in Haywood County, including the Pigeon River, originates in Haywood County.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's right.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere, I believe, where it's the only county in the United States where that's true. Absolutely
that?
no water runs into Haywood County.
Well, the elevation of Haywood County is, I mean, you're in the mountains.
Yeah, it's higher than it is over here.
Yes. Yes.
Buncombe.
Well, guys, we have just about filled up our little allotted time here for Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan.
Can we come back for a second show with
I like you thinking.
Richard?
I like you thinking.
If we can get him to hang around?
I'd be flattered, guys, very much. Thank you.
Get us in touch with Richard Hurley Music. Richard, before we sign off of this episode, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks and talk further with Richard. But if anyone's interested in talking to you about appearing and making some music for them, tell us how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, my website is richardhurleymusic.com, and I've got an easy phone number. It's 828-299-9222, 299-922.
You're going to write a song about that phone number.
There you go. There's a story behind how I got that number, too.
Richard Hurley, mountain musician, folk musician, and friend of Randy and Dave on Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan. Hope you've enjoyed the show today. And again, come back in a little while for another episode, and we'll talk more with our friend Richard Hurley on Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan.
Be sure to click the subscribe button for another episode of Hot Mic with Randy Houston and Dave Hogan.